Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. One of the emerging dangerous designer drugs currently in the market is alpha PVP. Its popular name is called Flakka. It's a man-made synthetic drug shipped over from China and has the potential to be much more dangerous than cocaine. It can create powerful hallucinations, hyperstimulations, paranoia, violent aggression, and self-injury. Now, body temperatures can rise dangerously and can lead to kidney damage or failure. Heart attacks and suicides can also happen. My next guest is all too familiar with drugs. At age 12, he joined his older friends in smoking pot. At age 14, he started selling it. He tried ecstasy at age 15, cocaine at 16, heroin and prescription pills at 17. Chris comes from an educated, middle-class family. He was offered a college basketball scholarship but turned it down, a regret he lives with today. Now, Chris made several attempts to come clean. During a stay in a halfway house, he was introduced to Flakka. Here with me now to share his story is Chris Patterson. Please welcome him. Chris, thank you so much for sharing it. I appreciate it. Thank you. So tell me about Flakka and tell me why you decided to try it. Because I know you've been at a halfway house and trying to get things turned around. Tell me why you tried Flakka.
Yeah, I was clean for a bit, and at the halfway house, right outside of it, there was a few people that kind of were familiar with the people in the halfway house, and they were using it, and I had heard about it and never really experimented with it. I mean, as you know, I have quite a little history there.
Sure, sure.
So the price is cheap, and
how cheap? What's the price?
I mean, $5 you can get an amount that'll get you high, like higher than what I've felt on $30 worth of cocaine or 2 hits of ecstasy, but the side effects were. So what ended up happening was I heard that, and I also heard it doesn't show up on a regular drug panel test.
Oh, really? Because it's synthetically made.
Exactly. So the addict in me thinking, okay, well, maybe I can try this, get away with it, and still be clean at my halfway house and try to still keep going with my, I guess you would say, clean time. But obviously didn't work out that way.
Yeah. So let me ask, so some people never heard of Flakka in this audience or people are watching. How does it make you feel when you take it?
The way it makes me feel, I mean, it would be a combination of many drugs. I'd say maybe ecstasy mixed with cocaine. I mean, some people might describe it as using meth. I've never really tried that, but I've heard the similar effects cause the same thing. High body temperature.
But do you feel like you can conquer the world like with cocaine and kind of just calm at the same time?
It does kind of give you that sense of Superman. I mean, it's
really dangerous.
I walked for miles and miles on one run, and then at the end, the next day, my feet were swollen, my legs were swollen, I was dehydrated, like maybe lost like 5 pounds in a span of like 24, 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty scary. And here's the thing, and he says, and I want you to understand this, is that a lot of people feel like drug use is only a choice. Obviously, there are some things you can control, but it's a disease. If you hear Chris talk, he says, you know what, the addict or the behavior in me said I could get away with this. He understands. It's almost like having diabetes but not having an insulin. That we don't have the insulin right now. And what we have is just telling people, listen, you know what, we want you to get the best diet. And it's really important as we listen to Chris and others that this is a disease that has to be treated. So, you know, I mean, I think that a lot of people make judgments. We can do a lot with personal choice, clearly, but there's also some biology that's back there. Now, in my notes I had, you know, one of your times when you were using drugs, you had a moment of clarity that really turned things around for you. I really want you to tell people that, because if you're watching, I want you, if you're having the same problem that Chris is, what was that moment of clarity? How did it make you turn around because of that?
Actually, it was during that time where I told you I was on like a 48-hour run, and
your legs were all swollen up and hurting.
Feet are swollen, kind of looking like I belong on the side of the road.
Wow.
So I'm using with a couple friends, and at this point I'm using other drugs as well, Flakka, some heroin, some Roxys, and I was drinking as well to try to counteract the high and the low. And we end up finding somebody that wants to use with us. He's like, oh, come back to our house. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's just a house that this guy owns or something like that. Turns out we get there, the door's been broken in by the police already, busted down door. There's no power, there's no water. The back pool, empty water, with no water, but full of beer cans. Jeez. Garbage all over the house, mattresses flipped over, empty baggies, syringes, everything. And I just sat there and I was like,
this is not my future.
This is not me. This is not Chris. This is not where I need to be sitting, especially knowing what I know in recovery now and the tools that I've been taught by the Cove Treatment Center that I've come from, and if it wasn't for the stuff that they've showed me, I probably wouldn't have made it out of there.
But I congratulate for that. Big round of applause for recognizing that, because a lot of people get that and then they continue to stay in that environment. And so you took those tools, and if you're listening, that and watching that, he took that environment and he said, you know what, instead of jumping into it and say it's okay and adjusting to it, you made a change. Now tell me about your mom. She made a big impression. Tell me about what kind of change she made in your life and how she helped with this.
I mean, my mom is my rock. She's raised me, played mother and father my entire life, and she's always made me aware of the addiction gene, but at the same time, I kind of hid things from her growing up, and then as I got progressively worse, we kind of lost connection. Like, we lost that mother-son bond because I was embarrassed to be around her.
Yeah.
But it was in May, actually, Mother's Day. I had been on a run for a while, and I came up to her, unfortunately Mother's Day, but at the same time, she said it was the best gift ever. I told her, I was like, Mom, I need help. I need to go to treatment because my addiction has taken over me. And usually, a parent might be upset with their child or not understand why can't you stop, but she understood, and she drove me to my first inpatient treatment center, and that was the best decision I've ever made.
That's wonderful. And as I'm a parent, and if you're a parent watching, your kids need you for your whole life. It's just because they turn 17, 18, it doesn't mean it's over. And your kids really need you. And he said was something very important. Folks who are abusing drugs and are in that spiral with drugs take over your life are deeply embarrassed by it. Don't think they don't understand what they're doing. So you have to be supportive. And I'll tell you, when you have a partner, anything that you're doing, including trying to treat the disease that you have, it's so much easier. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll meet the founder of Cove, an adult drug and alcohol addiction treatment facility where Chris received help. Please stay with us.
It's a combination of genetics, behavior, and environment. So it's very difficult to predict who will use drugs and become addicted and who will walk away and not become addicted.
Welcome back to Ask Dr. Nandi. Experimenting with drugs doesn't mean one will automatically get addicted. When someone uses a drug, they experience unnatural, intense feelings of happiness. Now here's the problem. In the brain is a chemical called dopamine. It's responsible for transmitting signals between brain cells. When the brain senses too much, scientists say dopamine gets reduced. And if we don't have dopamine, we don't care about anything. When a person comes down from their high, they can feel flat, lifeless, and depressed. The brain remembers these intense happy feelings, and guess what? They want to raise dopamine levels back up. As one keeps using drugs, they need larger amounts to recreate that same high. These brain changes are believed to be the driving force behind someone seeking out drugs compulsively. Now, rejoining me is Chris Patterson. Next to him is addiction specialist Corcoran-Walsh. Now, Karen is the founder and owner of the Cove Center for Recovery, an adult drug and alcohol addiction facility where Chris receives help. Please welcome them. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, tell me about Flakka and why are people, using this, and tell me how. I know it's dangerous, but why are young kids using this now?
Well, many young kids are using this because it's inexpensive.
Inexpensive. He's talking about it was $5.
Exactly. It's readily available, and it's attractive to the risk takers. Children are often risky in their behaviors.
Right.
It's new. They like things that are trendy, and they're attracted to it.
And it's not scary to them, is it?
No, it's not. No.
Chris talked about that situation where he's walking for miles and his legs were swollen up. And I'm sure others that you've seen that have had that, it doesn't scare them as much or they don't have that revelation, do they? They just kind of keep going.
Often they keep going until something stops them, unfortunately.
No, my notes, Chris had his addiction. You had to treat it at the Cove Center. How did you treat him? And he's obviously very successful. What did you guys do?
Well, when Chris was first admitted to the Cove, we did an extensive history and physical. Okay. And we had to look at the reasons why Chris was struggling chronically with relapse. And when we looked into his history and his drug use, we found that he needed to look at something that was different about his behaviors. That would be what was going on in times when he wasn't craving to get high? What was he doing when he didn't have the cravings to go out and use? We started using a multidisciplinary approach, using solution-focused therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and recently EMDR, to step in and really make a difference and set aside what was going on with Chris.
Let me go back so those of you who are following, what you're saying is that you said you want to know what he's like when he's not high. And tell me and how people at home understand why that's so important.
It's important because when someone is struggling with addiction, they often focus on the time when they're craving and the time when they're high, helping them to realize that there are moments of success and what's going on, what is surrounding them, how do they feel, where are they, and look at those times as strength-building opportunities.
And almost like saying that, listen, it's not just when you're high, but when you're not high that you can have these feelings of self-fulfillment and joy. Is that the idea?
Yes, it is.
So it's important. So, what happens is that, I remember, I think Steven Tyler said this, of the band Aerosmith. He said, I spent my entire life trying to get the joy. He used to have a family, I think, cabin in a lake, and he had this amazing feeling when he jumped off the lake into the water. He said he spent his entire life looking for that, and he could never find it. Even 20,000 people screaming his name, whatever drug he took, he couldn't find it. So it's amazing that you say that. I'll tell you, Chris, what things, did you take away from the Cove that has helped you to stay away from drugs? Because you've been clean for 30 days now. Yeah.
One thing definitely is the relapse prevention plan that they've helped me with.
The relapse prevention plan.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Okay.
And they've helped me deal with my own problems that may have caused my addiction in the first place, such as anxiety, depression, and dealing with certain situations the proper way instead of using drugs to cope or to numb the feeling of it.
That's wonderful. And both of you, tell me, if you could we don't have a lot of time, but what can other parents, like myself, do to prevent teens from going through what you did?
Honestly, educate them. Like in my school, we never really had someone come in and show us the damage of drugs and what it can do and lead to. But I mean, if you'd walked me through, let's say, a jail when I was younger and said, look, drugs and alcohol can get you to this place, or a morgue, it would probably scare me straight.
Great, and you're on your way. I mean, you've got a ways to go, but you're on your way. It's awesome. We do have a question in the audience. Who is the questioner?
Why do some people become addicted to drugs while others do not?
Awesome question, Ken. What do you think? What's going on? Why? This is a big question.
It is a big question, and it's a question that we try to answer as professionals in the field of addiction. It's a combination of genetics, behavior, and environment. So it's very difficult to predict who will use drugs and become addicted and who will walk away and not become addicted. But it's important to think about what is going on in each person's life and to pay attention to the signs and symptoms before addiction occurs. Drug use turns to drug abuse, and that becomes addiction. So preventing the addiction from occurring is a huge factor.
And an important thing that Karen has mentioned, and also Chris alluded to, obviously your environment's important, your behavior's important, and people tend to label folks like Chris who've had problems in their life. Unlike a diabetic, unlike a heart disease patient, we have to recognize is that there are factors that are genetic, that Chris is already behind the 8 ball. Can he solve his problem? Absolutely. But we have to support him and understand that this is a disease. To me, that's my passion to be able, that's why we do these shows. Because I want people to understand that don't label them as such and such, because we all have genetic problems that make us more at risk to have a disease, and this is not anything